And going live now.
Thank you. Okay, Council, we have 1 minute still. We have everyone on. I don't know why I didn't think earlier in this council Zoom meeting process to use one computer for Zoom and one computer for the agenda. So I'm feeling like this will be a lot smoother today. Okay, so it is 2 o'clock now. We will call to order our regular meeting of council and start by just recognizing and appreciating that we are holding our meeting today on the unceded territories of the Hupachesset and Sishot First Nations. We do have a agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to add but from councillors? Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, maybe we can have a discussion regarding the government's announcement about small business funding, rental funding.
We'll add that to new business. Anything else? Okay, seeing none. Would somebody, and any late items from the city clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So would somebody like to move our agenda as amended?
We'll move.
Moved by Councillor Koon. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we have minutes from the special meeting of council held at 10:30 a.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on May 11th. Would somebody like to move adoption?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to submit electronically questions or comments to council on topics of relevance to city council. A maximum of 4 submissions will be accommodated. Just a reminder to members of the public that you can submit your any questions or comments you have for either public input period or question period at the end of council meetings to council@portalberni.ca. City Clerk, did we receive any submissions today?
None received at this point, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So a reminder that there is an opportunity to submit questions or comments for question period, which is at the end of our meeting. So we'll be monitoring that email address as we move on through the meeting. And next we will go to delegations. And our first delegation from the Ministry of Transportation, the highway, something just happened with my screen here. Okay, we're still on. Our first delegation is Michael Pearson, District Manager of Transportation, and Darren, Senior Project Manager from the Ministry of Transportation. Welcome. I think we lost the share screen. Oh, probably because they might be using it for.
Yes, they should be using it for their presentation, Madam Mayor.
Okay, great. Michael, are you guys there? Can you hear us?
They are there physically. I can see them, Madam Mayor. I can see 3 gentlemen on the Zoom video and they just unmuted themselves.
Perfect. Michael, can you hear us?
I can now. Can you hear
Oh,
us?
perfect. Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are ready for you. Thanks so much for joining us. And before you start, I know that we are here to talk about the Kennedy Hill updates, but we just wanted to thank you for the preliminary work that you guys are doing in other parts of our community, Johnston Road as well. And we know that you'll be bringing to the public shortly the work that you've done on that. So we're looking forward to seeing that also.
Great. Well, thank you, and thanks for having us. Yeah, our primary purpose today was to talk to you about Highway 4 and the Kennedy Hill project. But if there's any time or any questions about the work we've been doing on Johnson, we're happy to speak to that as well.
Thank you.
So if I could, I'll share our screen with you. And I have Darren England here, our Senior Project Manager for the Kennedy Hill project. And he can walk us through a bit of a PowerPoint. If you can see this?
Yep.
Excellent.
So yeah, I just want to start kind of with the high level information around the project, kind of reintroduce people to everyone about the scope, schedules, and budget kind of aspects. So we started this project 2 years ago, construction wise, in spring of 2018. The scope of the project was to improve a kind of a notorious 1.5 kilometer section of the highway along Kennedy Lake and really try to establish a more standard cross section, full traveled lane widths, paved shoulders, roadside barrier on the lakeside, and then a big improvement being kind of rock stabilization and containment on the mountainside. Pre-existing conditions, basically, as you can see in the photo, are zero even drainage ditch, let alone rock catchment zone. So we're now widening to achieve a rock fall catchment footprint that does facilitate drainage as well as rock fall catchment. Total project budget is $38.1 million, and in the beginning of construction there in March of 2018, we awarded a $29.1 million contract to Emil Anderson, who's actively working there ever since. Well, the key kind of aspects of this project are the extremely challenging site conditions. We've got very high rock bluffs right beside BC Hydro transmission lines. These are the only power feed to the West Coast. Communities obviously in Kilometres there. And then we've got Kennedy Lake, which is just literally a stone's throw off the edge of the highway down into the lake. So we're really trying to focus on keeping blast rock out of the lake, not having any blast fly rock or impact hydro infrastructure. So they're both constraints being side by side. Generally the same mitigations apply to both, but one of the challenges we've had, an ongoing challenge, but more so recently, is blast rock kind of accumulating on the highway and trying to get things back open during road closures windows or planned road closure windows. So that's the other constraint, is obviously keeping traffic moving on this relatively narrow quarter footprint that we have to work with. So we're constantly kind of working through that. The next slide here kind of shows further detail of those challenges in play with the height of the rock cuts and the narrowness of the environment. There's a substantial volume of the cut that actually has to be done via hand drilling and blasting, and all the scaling on site. So scaling being kind of the removal of loose rock, has to be done by hand. So that is crews rappelling over the cliffs daily and just multiple hours each and every day, either with drill rigs in hand, drilling holes for each blast shot, or using crowbars and pry bars and scaling loose rocks. So in this photo here, you can see kind of the scale of things. Each of those circles is scalers, the middle one being two guys standing there. So it's definitely a challenging site there, and you can even see the proximity of the hydro lines just offset to the crew there. So as I was saying, in the kind of the challenges of the debris and scaling aspects of closing the highway, we've hit a number of challenges on kind of two primary bluffs on this project. And the photo on the right is one of the bluffs where we had the road failure in January of this year. And the challenge typically, and what it originates around, is there's large naturally occurring rock blocks. So boulders, the size of a house basically in some cases, that are naturally wanting to shear off and slide off the mountainside. So we have to find what methods and ways to take those down in a controlled manner. For the most part, we're able to do that in a very planned and controlled way during the planned road closures. But periodically, we've had these incidents where the road hasn't opened as planned, and pretty much every time it's been to do with one of these blocks not performing or falling and dislodging the way we planned, and then the subsequent scaling it is required to stabilize that zone before it's safe for the general public to pass underneath. So that's an ongoing challenge we have. We've also have issues periodically with existing rock bolts holding up some of these blocks, where we set charges off and certain procedures to shear that steel bolt, but it doesn't always go as planned. So that's some of their challenges we're encountering. So I kind of mentioned about the slope failure there in January. That's the photo on the left there. This is a drone image of the zone that's been since repaired so that we got the traffic lane back open. But what ended up happening, a large volume of debris impacted a very relatively old retaining wall that will ultimately be removed, and the whole highway alignment shifted inland onto bedrock in this area. But the old bin wall essentially gave way under the volume of rock above it. Caused prolonged multi-day closure of the highway there while we work to establish a temporary bridge. So the bridge has now been removed, the slope repaired so that blasting could continue above it. Another kind of challenge of existing slopes is we've found a few different locations over the last couple of years where the old highway, which used to be a logging road, was basically built on what we refer to as corduroy road, which is side-by-side logs laid down during that initial logging road construction. So we don't like to leave those behind. They have long-term stability ramifications. So we've had a few areas where we had to go and chase and remove those. This photo on the right is from actually early last year, when we removed it on the north embankment, which is near the northern limits of the project, and is an area that's now complete. So we currently sit, and this is as of I guess April. The timeline of this presentation is definitely more than a month kind of postponed, because we presented or created this for presentations to all the local municipalities, and obviously with COVID hitting, we've had to kind of pick and choose when we can present this information at new council meetings. So so as of I'll say kind of March, April window, we were 60% complete. Blasting is definitely the ongoing day-to-day operation on site of blasting the rock and hauling it to the remaining embankments. It's a 24-hour operation. To date, as of, like I said, kind of that March-April window, we've had over 120,000 cubic meters of blast rock actually blasted and moved. It's equivalent of 30,000 large dump trucks, basically the large rock, yellow rock buggies we have on site. We've also, in addition to that, have 35,000 cubic meters of soil. So your topsoils, your gravels and other materials that we encounter when we're doing our excavations. And then 46,000 cubic meters is still what we have left in these, primarily in 2 remaining bluffs on site. So to date, over 430 blasts. As of truly today, we're actually over 470, I think it is now. On average, there's each individual blast is over 150 meters of drill hole for it. That's 30 or 40 holes per blast, if a couple 2 to 3, 4 meters deep, depending on the exact blast design. But that kind of shows how much effort is required to actually let off every individual blast, and a large volume of those blasts have been done via hand drilling. So there's over 9 kilometers of drill hole done by hand, and 54 kilometers of drill hole done by machine. So it kind of gives you an order of magnitude of what it takes to remove that much rock. 100,000 kilograms of explosives used in all those blasts. Each individual blast by volume, if you kind of do quick backwards math there, it's only around 400 cubic meters on average, and that's a small fraction of a typical highway design blast. So it isn't that, some of these incidents we've had people say, oh, they're just loading up the charges too much and blasting things to kingdom come kind of. It's definitely not that. Typical blasts on like the Malahat, for instance, in southern Vancouver Island, where we've got active blasting operations underway right now, they're anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 cubic meters in a single blast, and that's normal. That's not high risk or any kind of untowards operation. So this site is definitely very slow and methodical in order to control that rock coming down. In addition to all the blasting, we actually have another scope on the project is a slope stability system, where in the top right corner there, you can kind of see the rectangular alignment, kind of rebar brown color there. It's a pile wall system that helps support that section of the highway from basically for seismic events and just overall stability of the highway. So in that zone, there's over 800 meters of steel pile installed already. and they're just in the process actively on site pouring the pile cap, the concrete pile cap for that right now. And then with all the new rock surfaces exposed, we have over 1 kilometers of bolts and anchors, as well as a substantial volume of rock meshing that's actively being installed across the project. So during construction, the contractor has a process, and this is applicable to all our provincial contracts, but the contractor has a process where they can propose alternatives to the design to find efficiencies and savings for both parties. In this case, there were a few challenges we were really early in the project had been encountering with the volume of rock and the constraint of taking the rock down. So we've actually entered into a new design with our contractor that slightly adjusts the alignment of the highway and avoids over 130,000 cubic meters of rock in exchange, if you will, for adjusting the alignment that will now introduce 4 short cantilever bridge structures. And it also adjusts the footprint of where the bulk of our rock embankment would have been going to achieve a balance on site, so we don't have to haul the rock off site. So that fill zone was going to be the future rest area. So we're still achieving the rest area, but we're now able to do so on the lake side of the highway. So if you were looking at any early project renderings, they would have been showing a rest area on the mountainside. So a lookout kind of looking across the new highway alignment and then out across the lake. So now with this adjustment, we're able to have a rest area that is on the lake side, which has a benefit, and it was an issue that some locals had raised early on, is that the benefit of tourists not wanting to run across the highway to get that what perceived to be maybe a better shot of the lake for a photo. So this one will have that benefit to it, as well as another big benefit was on the environmental front, with over 3 hectares of older growth forests salvaged. In the photo on the bottom left there, kind of where the word rest is and just below it, there was a large embankment proposed there for the alignment. So that would have required that whole area to also be clear cut. So there was a substantial volume of trees salvaged with this approach. So with all these kind of ancillary kind of benefits, we've gone down this road of pursuing this adjustment, and they're actively pursued these rock cuts and the development of these cantilever bridge sites. So the overall scope is still as it was intended for the overall alignment and width and whatnot. It's just kind of a better alignment to pursue given the conditions we found when we started falling trees and really getting into the meat of the ground there. So yeah, the next slide here might be the video best to show for that. Yeah, we're going to try to pull up a video to show that's a 3D fly-through comparing a drone fly-through of current conditions. So it kind of can show you the state of the project from the air here. But let's we'll get it going. So hopefully you can see that. So this is the north end of the project, or Porto Burnie end as you're approaching. And so where the bulldozers are going there, that's the new highway alignment, kind of creating a bit of a causeway. And then as you kind of come towards the lake there, the alignment curves through a through cut. So it's actually below and in the ground below the existing highway. And then as you come through here on the right, that large fill there is the new rest area footprint. So the new highway will come kind of to the left of it as it comes down the hill here. Yeah, so this is kind of a view of the rest area in that right underneath the camera there. Just off in the distance there, just beyond the truck and that immediate power pole, you can see the slope stability retaining wall that I was referring to. So it's a large length of piles founded into bedrock below, kind of supports that overall slope area there. And then the bottom half of the hill, this is where the vast bulk majority of our rock cuts are, and this is where the design was adjusted with a relatively simple 2 or so meter shift in alignment. It almost halves the amount of rock we have to deal with, but it does introduce these span areas where we have to put in short cantilever bridges. So the cantilevers, they're not clear span as you kind of typically see crossing a ravine or a river. They actually have an abutment on both the uphill and downhill end, as well as along effectively the center line of the highway. So these were utilized extensively on the Sea to Sky Highway project, and actually even more recently on the Kicking Corpse Canyon project. Highway 1 project to Alberta. So we're using those kind of newer technologies to try to salvage some of the, or not salvage, but mitigate some of the challenges that we've had with the rock blasting underway. So moving ahead, kind of the key milestones, we're trying to remove these last remaining 2 bluffs. They're kind of the most stubborn on the site. Trying to get them down this summer, and then the focus will be on these 4 small sites for the cantilevers, which will take a few months each to complete. So the goal is to have paving on much of the site done for this fall, and then trying to get towards completion this winter. We have been encountering challenges recently that are constantly reevaluating our schedule and our overall progress on the site, but that's also in conjunction with dealing with kind of the ongoing challenges of COVID. Crews are following proper safety procedures and keeping isolation on site, but the number of crew had a decrease in April there and early May, with going down to 1 shift instead of 2. So there was a slowdown in that regard. So the original schedule was to finish in summer of 2020. We're now looking to pave late this fall with total completion in winter 2020. Now this was prior to our kind of current challenges we're undertaking on site. So the earliest that we'd be completing is this coming winter. But we're again trying to focus on those key milestones for the blasting that needs to happen over these next few months here on the main bluffs. Once those bluffs are down, the traffic closures, the general impacts that cause most of the day-to-day grief, if you will, with the traveling public, it'll drastically improve that type of operation once those bluffs are down. The blasting beyond those bluffs is much like we undertake on the Malahad or any other corridor, where we only need a 15-minute kind of closure of the highway to kind of tackle the work, and not these prolonged multi-hour closures that we're actively doing right now. So that's kind of the update. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate all of the information. Are there questions from councillors? Councillor Washington.
Are you able to hear? We're not able to hear on our end.
No, I think he's trying to unmute himself. Anyone else have a question while we wait? Okay, Dan, keep trying to unmute yourself. We'll go to Councillor Corbeil first.
I'm just curious if you've been able to stay within your original budget with all that's gone on out there.
Right now, officially, yes. There are definitely ongoing challenges with the contractor and some outstanding disputes that are ongoing. So the final budget hasn't been set, and it's subject to what those outstanding disputes resolve at. But officially, right now, the contract value remains as it was announced initially.
Thank you, Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Gentlemen, great presentation. I'm glad to see everything's progressing. Just a quick question. Where would you be hauling all your excess rock and dirt to?
So when I was referring to that rest area and that large embankment, that was one of the key kind of features of the original design, and still remains a key feature, is that all the rock and earth produced on this project site is staying on this site. We didn't want to be mass hauling these hundreds of thousands of cubic meters off site. So where that rest area footprint is, that is all the blast rock, that is all the soil and earth piled up on site. So we're able to utilize that fill for the rest area.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Paulson.
Just straying a little bit away from the Highway 4 Kennedy Hill project, is this kind of the same regimen that we would tentatively go through around Angel Rock?
Yeah, I can kind of point to that. Knowing Angel Rock myself, even just driving by there, and it'd be very similar. The only, I'll call it a saving grace maybe a bit on Angel Rock is the bluff is substantially smaller that you're dealing with there than you are at Kennedy Hill. So yes, the regimen and the procedure would be the same, but the overall duration would be substantially less. Yeah, it's a fraction of the size of bluff because it's really just one kind of bluff itself, where Kennedy Hill is a bluff that's, you know, a kilometer long.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sounds like it could be reasonably simple to get done.
By comparison.
Sure.
Like, oh, maybe not. Are there questions from other councillors on this? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for coming to present and for all of the information. And I want to thank you for keeping us updated along the way, as you have as well, when there have been closures and when there have been challenges. I can imagine how difficult a project like this is, and just on its own, let alone, you know, having to work with the public and work on communications when things aren't going perfectly, as things rarely do. So you guys have done a fantastic job on that from our end. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. And if there's no more questions, we'll move on to our next delegation.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and our next delegation we have today from the Arts Council, we have Nancy Blair and Melissa Martin. And I don't see anyone anymore. Oh, there we go. Everything has just changed on my end for some reason. Hang on. There we go. Okay.
I don't see Melissa, but I see, oh, there she is.
Okay, we do have Melissa and Nancy both on. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to hear from you, so I will just pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, councillors and city staff. The Community Arts Council is delighted to present to you our thoughts and findings concerning the Childcare Spaces project that you invited us to consider as a possible addition to the Rowan Arts Centre. And I'm just going to attempt to share the screen with you. There we go. So I'll jump right into our presentation on what we have named the Children's Centre at the Rowan Arts Centre. After some initial hesitation, we are now excited about this opportunity and the possibilities it offers to the Arts Council, the city, and to children and families in the Alberni Valley. Now, there are 4 things that got us to this place of excitement. First, we researched and reviewed the funding information, the childcare needs assessment prepared for the ACRD in 2019, and the province's early learning framework. And we reviewed best practices in early childhood education. We also met with potential partners such as the school district, including the early years, with early childhood educators and providers, and with the North Island College ECE program. We toured facilities such as the Family Hub at E.J. Dunn, but unfortunately COVID-19 postponed our visits to other sites. And we caught the enthusiasm from those working in the field for the chance to connect art and nature with children. Their enthusiasm focused on the Reggio Emilia learning approach and the possibility of creating a purpose-built facility at Rowan Arts Centre. There is great potential to make Port Alberni a leader in the ECE field, and I'll explain this in a bit more detail later. We are aware that the funding opportunities may be combined. However, each must be for a separate age group. The Community Childcare Spaces Fund through UBCM provides funding up to $1 million. It would focus on ages 0 to 36 months. We see great importance and benefit in retaining a local childcare operator who can offer the Reggio Emilia approach, which is deemed as a best practice in the ECE field. In a few slides, I'll be going over the basic principles and showing why co-locating with the Rowan Arts Centre makes perfect sense. The focus of the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund would be 3 to 5-year-olds and would especially offer care outside of traditional hours. The funding of up to $3 million would assist with some renovations to the Arts Centre ensuring that the two buildings are connected and space utilization is maximized for both. Based on our research and the funding criteria, our vision for the Children's Center is an awe-inspiring and inviting facility that goes hand in glove with innovative and creative partnership between the arts and early childhood education. Thus, the Children's Center and the community itself will be leaders in showcasing the value of supporting children and their families by combining art, nature, and education while meeting city and government stated goals. With more than 50 years proven history in this community, the Community Arts Council is well equipped to undertake this project. We are a focal point for the arts and culture. We have strong networks with artists and cultural groups. We offer an inviting facility and grounds that add to the experience. We know how to create new networks and partnerships, and we are able to attract volunteers in the arts and culture sector. Our world is facing many challenges, and children need to be creative, imaginative problem solvers. The quotes from Albert Einstein illustrate this perfectly. And while it would be fine to construct a utilitarian building and run it with a conventional childcare program, we're suggesting something quite different for this center, an inspiring and cutting-edge way to meet the need for childcare. I'll turn now to the Reggio Emilia learning approach. We feel that you will have some affinity with it because the municipality of Reggio Emilia in Italy has taken a leading role in developing the model and creating public policy that supports early childhood education. This learning approach is at the leading edge of innovation in the ECE field. It is consistent with BC's early learning framework, and principles of it are already being used in the Alberni Valley. Particularly exciting is the possibility for this childcare center to be a learning lab for North Island College ECE students who are already utilizing this approach. Many learning centers throughout the world now use this Reggio Emilia philosophy, but few have been purpose-built. Briefly, there are 6 main principles. The first considers the image of the child, where each is viewed as strong, independent, curious, and full of imagination. Children are empowered to think, question, explore, and investigate. So rather than imposing learning, teachers allow the curriculum to emerge. Through detailed project work, children can immerse themselves in learning themes of particular interest to them, which fosters a predisposition for lifelong learning. The teacher is viewed as a partner in learning with the children. They guide the learning experiences and co-construct knowledge along with the children. The learning environment plays a vital role and is viewed as the third teacher. It includes the classrooms, common spaces, and playground areas, and should reflect the children, teachers, and parents. Unique to the Reggio Emilia approach is the studio and resident artist. There could be rotating artists in residence at the childcare center we envision, enabling children to explore a wide range of artistic forms and learning opportunities. So what is in it for us, the Arts Council? In a nutshell, the Arts Council's mission is to enhance the quality of life through the arts, and this project allows us to do just that. We want to be involved with this project, and particularly with the Reggio Emilia approach. We see it as a great fit with the Rowan Arts Center. It is at the leading edge of innovation and arts education, which is where our passion lies. And we see how this center will increase child and family participation in the arts and attract more people to Rowan Arts Center. Importantly, done this way, the project protects our reputation, because if it is attached to the building that we occupy, people will assume that we have responsibility for it. And the project is an opportunity to upgrade our building and grounds. And as for the city, the childcare center we propose will benefit the city by creating more spaces at a very high standard. The city will be seen as a leader in the province by combining ECE and the arts. Locally, the city will be inspiring the ECE field and developing a Reggio Emilia learning lab within the community. The city will demonstrate the power of having strong partnerships with the arts. And it will be developing one of the few purpose-built Reggio Emilia centers in Canada. On the site, we see a development that features a building purpose-built to incorporate Reggio Emilia learning principles. Renovation to the ground floor of Rowan Arts Center and expansion to connect with the Children's Center, plus shared space for a studio resident artist, as well as space for the NIC Learning Lab. Well, nothing is definite at this stage, of course. We have some ideas as to how the site might be laid out. We've also viewed indoor space layouts from Reggio Emilia Learning Centers. In order to proceed with this project, the Arts Council needs an understanding and commitment from the city that we are a full partner in all decisions that will affect the development and operation of the Children's Center, that we take a lead in hosting a table of partners to move the project forward, an assurance that the childcare delivery model will be Reggio Emilia, which perfectly utilizes what we have to offer. We understand that the city now has budget approval to proceed with the 2 grant applications and that the 2 contractors are selected to prepare the grants. Moving forward, we would see the Arts Council as a lead partner involved in all aspects of the project. We recommend a table of partners and have already established relationships with most of these groups. We are ready to call a meeting and move forward to involve them in this project. This is an incredibly exciting opportunity for the Arts Council, the city, and the community as a whole to do something really groundbreaking. We look forward to taking the next steps together, and we thank you for the opportunity to partner with you. And I'll be happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, not just for the presentation, but for the work that you've put into this. I know when we originally brought this idea, I think your group was a little bit hesitant just because, you know, it was a new idea and it hadn't been explored yet. And it's so wonderful to see all of the thought that you've put into it. And I just could not love this concept more. The only thing that's disappointing to me is that my youngest child will not be childcare age when this is built, because it just looks like a wonderful place for kids to get to grow and learn. So thank you so much for all that you've put into this.
Thank you,
Councillor, are there questions? Councillor Solda and then Councillor Koon.
Well, I must say the arts has come a long ways, and the Community Arts Council and the Rowan Arts Center, I worked there years and years ago, and I just love the concept, and I think it's great. And I echo what the mayor has already said. I hope in the future that too, if this all evolves, that you'll look at a little age difference, you know, not just from 5, but go up on the ladder, because the arts really need to be introduced to all students, all kids. And I can't wait to see what happens. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Councillor Koon.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the work that you've put into this project, and I'm very excited to see it move forward. And I think it's a great opportunity for our community and the children of our community. So thanks very much, and I really look forward to seeing it come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Poon.
Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say, I think that you took our very initial thoughts and conversations that we had. We really didn't know where we wanted to go, but you took those initial thoughts and conversations and really put it down on paper of what we had in mind for this childcare space. So thank you for all your hard work. And I'm really excited about this project and look forward to working with the Community Arts Council on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard.
Councillor Paulson.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. It's really gets the adrenaline going when you see that kind of excitement. It may be a little early to give this answer, but and I'm not looking for specific numbers, but there is going to be a early childhood education needs assessment done. Roughly how many spaces would there be in this facility? Just, and I don't need a 12 or 13. Is it 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 kids?
You know, I don't think I can answer that, because my understanding, my limited understanding, is that it's tied to the licensing requirements as to how many dollars per space. And we just don't know how much anything is going to cost yet. And I believe that the licensing requirements, there certainly has to be a certain amount of space for each child. So I just can't answer that right now. I'm sorry.
That's great. I guess I wasn't looking for an exact number. I just wanted to make sure that as we move this project forward, that we get our fair due, that we can actually address the amount of our population that we need to address.
Yeah. I agree with you that, we don't want to build a beautiful airy-fairy facility where only 10 kids can come. That would not be right. So, well, we'll have to look into that further.
And Ron, the only thing I would add is that we won't address the need with one facility, unfortunately. We're so far behind in the valley. The average or the suggested provincial kind of ratio for children to childcare spaces is 1 childcare space for every 2 children. And in the Alberni Valley, we currently have 1 childcare space for every 6 children. So we are very far behind. But we have to start somewhere. And I think another for me, a really important piece of this, when we looked at this concept originally, we looked at possibly renovating an old building and making something that we already had work. And for me, it's really important that we think of the children first. And so a purpose-built building that we're really planning for the quality of childcare that we want our children to have in our community is really important. And that's something that we just don't really have in this community. We're always taking old schools and old other spaces and using those for kids. So this is a really exciting concept.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa?
Madam Mayor, may I add to that? Although nothing's etched in stone right now, the initial concept that we put forward in the drawings was to establish where maybe the downstairs part of the building was for younger children, and then potentially have an upstairs facility that would accommodate a little bit older children. So although we don't know the numbers, it's at least accommodating a fair amount of children within a certain age bracket. So I don't know if that helps Councillor Polson's question or sort of gives him a little bit of an answer of what we are trying to attempt here.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Seeing none. Okay. Thank you very much again for the work you put into this. As you stated, we have put into our budget an allocation for this project to, of course, we know that if we are successful in grant funding, it is 100% funded by the province, but we have put money into our budget and passed that budget for the planning work that would need to be done. So I think the next steps would be for us to have more conversations about what that process will look like and how we can work together in the best way. So thank you very much for coming, and I'm sure we'll be talking again very soon.
Thank you for your time today.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, Council.
So, sorry. Oh, perfect. I'll just call the agenda back up and share my screen.
Okay, so we are moving on, Council, to unfinished business, item E1, and it is the notice of motion to explore transit service to East Vancouver Island. Councillor Koon, would you like to read the motion?
Yes, I'll read the motion, but if the deputy clerk could just bring it up, that would be great.
I can read it here if you don't have it.
Is it on the?
Sorry, it's right there on the first page of the agenda, right under the notice of motion. Are you?
Well,
we can't see the agenda on our screen.
Oh, okay.
Deputy Clerk, what is up on the screen right now
Oh,
is actually
apologies.
the minutes of the current meeting.
Sorry, apologies. 2 seconds. I got 2 things open here.
We're bound to have a couple of confusing points with this technology.
Here we go.
There we go.
Yes, thanks very much. And I'll move that council direct staff to prepare a report exploring next steps in establishing a bus route to East Vancouver Island.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Discussion. Councillor Solda, did you have a comment first?
Yes, I do. It's interesting because when Greyhound decided that they were going to sell the business and everything, and now Tofino Bus, and we're looking at the north side of the island, it's going to be without bus service. They're just starting to say no to bus service. So I think this is going to be very important, because I think we're going to have no bus service anywhere eventually on this island. So we need to move forward on this, and I totally support it.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Interesting to note, in 2016, there was a feasibility study looking at a bus service to Coombs. And I don't know if they ever implemented that, but certainly it sounds like a bus service from Port Alberni and a bus service going from Parksville to Coombs could somehow align. So I expect that the information is out there, at least for that side of the island. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what comes of it. They thought that it would cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $225,000 annually to run the bus to Coombs.
Thank you. Councillor Poon.
Well, just a few comments. I think that it's very important that we do explore transit service to East Vancouver Island. That really helps us with our economy and also bringing tourism in, but not only tourism, but to help people find jobs and things like that, right? So I think it's a good way to go, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see from the report. Thank you.
Are there other comments from councillors? Okay, so I have a comment then. I fully support this step forward in exploring it. And I think that connecting to the service on the east side of Vancouver Island that currently goes from, I believe, Qualicum to Nanaimo, but is in process of expanding or expanding to Ladysmith as well, and then possibly further. I think that Councillor Solda is very right. Eventually, we may have no bus service connecting island communities, and I think it's incredibly important that we do retain that service. And for that reason, I think we need to take control of making sure that we have the service. That said, I do think that given the conversation that's going on with the regional district right now, and the fact that this would run outside of the city, I thought about it after we put this motion forward and wondered if our first step should be exploring this with the regional district, because they are currently in transit conversations already. It doesn't seem to me like the right approach to have our staff explore a service that really should be an Alberni Valley service if we were to implement it. So I wonder if council would be supportive of amending the motion to saying something like that council directs staff to work with the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District to explore next steps in establishing a bus route to the east side of Vancouver Island. As we know, transit conversations are already going on with the ACRD right now to explore a bus to Sprout Lake. And alongside those conversations at the last meeting, we actually sent it back to the Alberni Valley and Bamfield Committee to have a greater conversation about Alberni Valley Transit, and possibly looking at a bus route that would connect more of the regional areas of the Alberni Valley. So I think the timing on this could be really perfect to have that conversation alongside and with the regional district, and really show a true partnership instead of just moving forward on our own. Councillor Koon.
Certainly, I support speaking with the regional district on this matter, because we shouldn't have to pay for it all of ourselves. They are benefiting too. So for sure, I think we should speak about it in a regional context. Thank you.
Councillor Solda.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, a while back, probably in 2014, the provincial government did a study on transportation on Vancouver Island. And there must be somewhere in that study relating to transportation on the island. And I think we should get hold of that. And the ACRD was part of that. So I think we need to move on that. And also, bus service was essential service. A while back when Greyhound came in with the province and that, there was contract saying, hey, you can't leave. And that's how it started. From there, it became Tofino Bus and then to where it is now and to where it is now. So the government has all that information. We just like to have some dialogue with them, I think.
Thank you. Other comments from councillors? Councillor Paulson.
I know we had a cursory discussion about this a couple of years ago, and that point in time, it was a non-starter with BC Transit. But with the evolving changes on island-wide bus service, whether it be through Greyhound or Tofino, those thoughts may have changed drastically or may change drastically in the future. You know, and when you had regular bus service, BC Transit would have been so heavily subsidized that it didn't make much sense, but it might in today's day and age. So it's worthwhile to revisit for sure.
Thank you. I completely agree. Are there any other comments? So I'm going to propose an amendment to the motion to reword the motion to read that council directs staff to work with the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District to begin exploring next steps in establishing or to see if there's an interest in beginning to explore next steps in establishing a bus route to East Vancouver Island.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further conversation on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And any further conversation on the main motion? Seeing none, all in favor on the motion as amended? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to reports. Item 1 is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated May 25, 2020 be received and checks numbering 146194 to 146253 inclusive and payments of accounts totaling $1,264,251.72 be approved.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage, a report on duplication of services. And I'm going to mute myself. Someone at my door.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the regular meeting of Council held January 13th, 2020, Council received correspondence for action from Port Alberni business owners in the fitness industry expressing concerns with the duplication of fitness programs. Moving forward, City staff will work with local businesses and the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce to ensure that recreation programs offered by the city are not duplicating or unfairly competing with programs provided by local organizations by undertaking, first of all, an audit of which offerings are currently provided by local organizations, and secondly, a gap analysis of programs currently unavailable in Port Alberni. Throughout the process, city staff will pay particular attention to ensuring viability of local programming, and staff will engage community to ensure accessibility of programs.
Thank you. Questions? Okay. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick one. I think this is a good opportunity to do this. We've had this complaint many times in the past, and I think moving forward, there's a lot of businesses who need us to back off and let them have their business, especially with what's happened in the world nowadays.
Absolutely. Councillor Koon.
Yes, I think this is especially important given the recovery that's now facing us, that we're now facing in the community. So let's give our support to these local businesses that are, doing programs that, don't need to be duplicated. Thank you.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a great opportunity to let businesses do what they do best and let city offer programs that they may have hadn't shown an interest in before, but didn't have the ability to do it because of time or instructors or our budget or whatever it is, that we can go in a different direction now. So this is a great opportunity for the city as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there other hands up? Councillor Paulson.
Thank you to Director Thorpe for the report. And this report has been done probably about every 5 years, I think. But I think it's a perfect opportunity as well for the city to engage with private operators to provide some combined services as well. You know, it might be a summer sports program where a private provider is a part of that program. So I think it's great that we revisit this frequently and explore the opportunities to share, and it could even be sharing marketing and involving each other. And I think the spirit of cooperation in what you've done since January is great. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read the motion as well?
I'd like to move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni receive the report from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage dated May the 12th, 2020, providing information about the services provided by the city's Parks, Recreation and Heritage Department and its efforts to ensure duplication unfairly competing with local organizations does not occur.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Wonderful. Moved and seconded. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And item 3 from the fire chief, early approval for the replacement of engine number 1 in 2021.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, so just moving down to the analysis. Previous councils have established a fire engine replacement schedule that maximizes the duration. The city will operate fire apparatus consistent with the lesser of the 2 pertinent standards, which are the Fire Underwriter Survey and NFPA. Fire engines are not replaced as scheduled. There's a corresponding increase that the engine will fail during an emergency. Insurance underwriters understand this as an increasing risk and do not recognize fire engines older than 20 years as contributing to the fire protection strength in urban settings. Engines are recognized in a reserve capacity between 20 and 30 years of age. Engine 1 has been serving in this reserve capacity since 2011 and is about to age out of the reserve status service. As noted, the city has realized the maximum possible lifespan from Engine 1. And I'll just note that the replacement of Engine 1 originally had been in the 2020 budget, but as we had the unscheduled replacement of the SCBAs, and we're trying to keep the 2020 budget as small as possible with the COVID scenario, we pushed that out to 2021. So now just seeking early approval for the replacement of Engine 1.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Corbeil.
Not a big question, just in the chart of costs there. My question is, does engine number 1 have any trade or scrap value, or do we have the ability to strip it for essential parts or anything that would, I don't know, somewhat offset some of the cost?
Certainly there would be equipment that we would be stripping off of it. We've already been discussing what some of that equipment might be, things like headsets and things of the like, so that we can support the rest of our existing fleet with that, as well as the loose equipment. That's not budgeted in this, and that's not our intention. Some departments will include loose equipment on that, and our intention is to move the loose equipment between the different pieces of apparatus. As far as just to answer your second question there with regards to scrap value, there may be some, but it tends to be pretty nominal when we're dealing with a 30-year-old truck. It doesn't have value to a municipality. So often what will end up happening is there's some programs out there where you can donate the fire engine to go to a third world country. And for them, it's a big perk, and they'll utilize it. But aside from that, they tend to not garnish a lot of value on trade-in or anything like that.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, Chief Owens, when they're over 20 years, they still have to meet some annual tests. Is that not correct?
That's right. We put it through a pump test every single year. Engine 1 actually just underwent that pump test last week, I believe. Yes.
And we're able to do that ourselves. We have people in the station that are qualified to do that.
Yeah, so typically what we do is we'll bring in a third party to come and assist our firefighter mechanic in doing that. It gets a third party set of eyes on it, so that if there's it allows us to, I guess, say that there is third party verification that our equipment is operating in the manner that we say it is.
Thank you. Councillor Washington, and then Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief Owens, I can appreciate what you're looking at. In my line of work, we had an example of a 1992 looking for parts for it on Saturday, and the first thing that the supplier said was "ooh," because stuff isn't available for that anymore. If it is, it's in Memphis, Tennessee, or somewhere like that. So I'd hate to see us down with an engine because we can't get a turbo hose or something for it. So I fully endorse this motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have 3 questions for Chief Owens, if you allow me.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The first one is, we've never been able to get any statistics from the fire department relating to the number of calls and what kinds of calls that the fire department is called on. So I have no idea how many structural fires that the department actually goes out on to justify the spending of this kind of money. Is it 1 structural fire a year, or is it 100, or somewhere in between? I have no idea. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I did present at the December 4th meeting, which I happen to have these slides here, and let me just see if I can pull that up. So at that meeting, again in December, our year-to-date was 40 structure fires that we had responded to, and the stat below that was when we compare the assessed value and minus the approximate damage, what we discovered there is that we saved approximately $12,024,000. So that's if we were to have a total loss versus what we were able to save. Those stats don't include outbuildings, and they also don't include the 7 responses that were made for structure fires at heavy industry, as it just wouldn't be fair to include those.
Okay, my second question is, the city has a mutual aid agreement with the volunteer fire departments of Beaver Creek, Sprout Lake, and Cherry Creek. And I believe that Beaver Creek has purchased a new fire engine. Does that not get included in the fire underwriter survey when they're calculating the premiums?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So that's already incorporated into the fire underwriter survey grading that we have. The automatic aid agreement, coupled with what each one of those volunteer fire departments have in their fleet. They have a maximum allotment for what can be considered. So you're not allowed to sit there with only 1 fire engine and let everybody around you accumulate all of your fire protection. So they limit that. I believe off the top of my head, I think it's around 30%. So that is incorporated already into our fire under survey grading.
Thank you. And my last question is, you stated insurance premiums paid by commercial and industry property owners may increase, but it's my understanding that the fire insurance premiums are based on a number of factors, and that the age of the fire trucks is a very small factor in assessing the total premiums. Is that not correct, or am I wrong?
You're correct in that there are a number of different factors. So subsurface infrastructure, the pipes that are in the ground, and what our water reservoirs have, and our ability to maintain fire flows for a prolonged period of time is certainly a factor. And also a substantial factor is the ability to actually respond in a timely manner. And so we have different grading points for different things, from fire prevention to again the subsurface infrastructure, to career department, the proximity of the fire hall to the majority of the assets within the community, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on from there. So it is one factor. I would say that it is one of the pillars, but there are other pillars involved there as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it would, and I've said this before, but we're always told that if we don't, if we explore decreasing staff in the fire department, if we didn't replace trucks, that our insurance may go up. I think it would be incredibly valuable to have some actual, rather than a speculative insurance may go up, some actual numbers on that. And I think often, what I need it for is explaining to the public the savings that we do get to counteract the cost of the service. So I think for our benefit, if we were able to put together some actual numbers from other municipalities, or from what going from one rating to another actually would do to our insurance, rather than kind of the concept that it may go up, it would be incredibly helpful for us to be able to help the public understand the value of the fire department beyond the basic value of keeping everyone safe. People like to understand the financial aspect of it as well. Sure. Councillor Solda, and then Councillor Koon.
Yeah, and we've also had comments too about volunteer and paid working together in the fire hall too. So, and we were told the same thing, Madam Mayor, about the insurance and stuff like that. So I would love that to be included too, because I know there's fire departments on the island that have both, and it would be nice to justify everything with the public, because they are questioning it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Koon, and then Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Chief Owen. So there is absolutely no other way for us to retain our rating here, other than to spend this money for engine number one.
Yeah, well, the rating that we have right now, we're holding on to. We just graduated into this level 2. I'm terming it wrong, but it's the second level for fire underwriter survey. And so any diminishment, if we were to lose our automatic aid agreement, if we were to choose to not replace fire apparatus, if we were to decrease our staffing, any of these things, we would slide down into a lower grading. And what keeps on being pushed upon me is that that will realize, it will be realized as an impact to insurance ratings. I agree that it's with Mayor and the councillors as spoke before with regards to having concrete numbers. What I found thus far, I would love to have concrete numbers too. It would certainly help me in these circumstances. And what I keep getting told is that there's such a plethora of different factors that go into each building's insurance grading, and those could be previous claims at that address. It could be the claims history within the community. It could be a number of different things. That's not to say that I won't go back to the fire underwriter survey and ask them again if they can provide us with something that I can bring back and present to council with some confidence on. I certainly will do that. But to answer your question, Councillor Koon, if we were to not replace this fire engine at this time, it's my understanding that we would lose the insurance grading that we currently have.
How long would it take them to notice and change our rating?
I can't speak to that. It's not the direction that I would personally like to go, is seeing how long that we can go without them noticing. But I don't have the answer directly to that question.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering. I'm not you know, I don't really know what the answer is anyway. So thank you.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corbeil.
Just shifting gears a little bit, Chief Owens. We're approaching wildfire season, and I understand that there were going to be members from the station that were going to get some sort of, I think, wildfire risk assessment training, and the COVID-19 came along, and I understand that the regional district received $157,000 from the UBCM to do wildfire activities. Could you just briefly tell us what kinds of things are on the horizon as far as, you know, wildfire activities?
Yeah, so the grant was applied for by the new protective services manager with the ACRD, and we were fortunate to have that grant accepted. So we do have that grant money in hand, and when I say we, it's the most royal of we, including the ACRD, as well as I believe Sachat and Hupachesik are in that as well. So the first event that happened, not the first event that may have been planned in a COVID-free 2020, was just this past week. There was some of that grant money was allocated to open up 4 different stations for people to go and hopefully fire smart their property, and then bring that yard waste no charge to 4 different locations within the city of Port Alberni. So that has already taken place. There is plans to undergo some training with that fire smart money as well. We want to kind of proceed cautiously with that, so that we're maintaining physical distancing and doing things of that nature. We continue to train our own Port Alberni Fire Department personnel to the relevant standard that has to be upkept every year. So we've done that, and then additionally, 2 of our command staff are engaging in training here coming up with the Office of the Fire Commissioner, which will focus on incident command strategies and tactics for interface fires. And that's actually not part of the Fire Smart program, but it's certainly relevant. And that's being offered free of charge in a physically distanced environment, just coming up here in the next week.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councillor Paulson.
It's a Ronnie come lately again. Just a quick comment. I mean, council could always say, no, we're not going to replace it. But if I was standing out in front of my house and it was on fire and we're missing a piece of equipment, I think I would rue the day that we did that. And I get that there's sticker shock attached to these kinds of vehicles, and it doesn't matter if it's a fire truck or a front end loader or whatever, but it's the reason why we have an equipment replacement fund, is so that we don't get shocked into having to pay the whole thing out of a tax purse So that's why we look forward to replacing this equipment over time. And at the end of the day, if we don't do this, we are going to be without a piece of equipment because it's aged out.
Leave yourself unmuted. You can read the motion, Councillor Paulson.
Look at me go. I'd like to move the council for the city of Port Alberni provide early approval to allocate $737,643 in 2021 for the replacement of engine number 1, with $609,500 from the equipment replacement reserve fund and $128,143 from general operating.
I'll second that.
Second it.
Moved by Councillor Paulson, seconded by Councillor Koon. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? One opposed, carried. Thank you very much. That is the end of the staff report. So moving on to bylaws. Our item number 1 from the Manager of Planning, we have the Advisory Planning Commission proposed official community plan and zoning bylaw amendments citywide for cannabis cultivation and processing. Thank you. Welcome to the Manager of Planning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So before you today for consideration are the first and second reading of bylaw amendments that will introduce cannabis production facilities as a permitted use within city limits. In the fall of 2019, both the Advisory Planning Commission and Council had given a high-level input and direction on how to introduce these uses, which incorporated both public input at the time and considered best practices demonstrated in other communities. So that direction, as you might be aware, was to permit certain types of indoor cannabis production facilities in industrial zones and limited commercial zones. To introduce regulations that would mitigate concerns about odor, noise, air quality, and clustering of cannabis uses, and to require that all cannabis production facilities obtain development permit approvals. So with this high-level direction, staff have now prepared the OCP and zoning bylaw amendments that would introduce new definitions, identify the specific zones for the uses, and provide other regulations and policy direction. So if we look to the definitions that have been proposed, they're consistent with Health Canada's definitions, and they include an overarching definition for cannabis production facilities, which is proposed to provide kind of a catch-all category for the general regulations that apply equally to all facilities. And then we've also included several specific use definitions, which would help differentiate the different facilities in different zones, kind of reflecting the nuance between different scale operations. With the zones themselves, what's been proposed is consistent with Council's previous high-level direction, which includes M1, M2, M3, our light, medium, and heavy industry zones, which would accommodate any type of cannabis production facility use. And then in the C3 and C4, service commercial and highway commercial zones, those would accommodate small-scale cannabis production facility uses, which are microprocessing, microcultivation, and nursery. Then within the zoning bylaws general regulations, these are rules that would apply equally to all cannabis production facilities located within any zone. We've included provisions that allow for licensing by Health Canada and the city, including a provision for a 300-meter buffer zone from sites containing a school, licensed daycares, or other cannabis production facilities. Details on when cultivation, processing, and retail uses can occur in conjunction on a site. Restrictions that cannabis production facilities would not be permitted in conjunction with any other use. Some provisions that require the containment of odor, noise, and light and glare within the facilities to avoid adverse effects. And then the requirements for obtaining a development permit approval, and then limits on the hours of operations. And so those would all be equally applied to any cannabis production facility. In terms of parking regulations, we have proposed that for commercial or industrial cannabis production facilities, 1 parking space per 1 employee or per 190 square meters of gross floor area, whichever is the greater. And then looking to the amendments to the official community plan, that would introduce the development permit area guidelines, specifically for both commercial and industrial style cannabis production facilities. So generally, these guidelines set standards for the form and character of development. And then these additional guidelines that would be applied to cannabis production facilities would help ensure the following aspects with regards to those types of developments. So information on venting and odor control, sound attenuation measures should be employed. So making sure sound is limited to the site, provisions for landscaping and fencing, provisions for loading zones and garbage facilities, lighting and security. So making sure that the site's secure by able to having proper lighting so that people can be seen properly, setbacks and buffer zones for conflicting and adjacent uses, signage for large industrial facilities, and sidewalk requirements in commercial zones. So the Advisory Planning Commission has reviewed these proposed bylaw amendments at their May 8th, 2020 meeting and recommended that council proceed as presented, though I think there's a few discussion points that were just maybe worth noting and bringing up for you today to consider. So the APC had asked if parks and playgrounds should be considered within the 300-meter buffer zone that we've included. And while this was something that we had considered initially, one of the attached maps that I think Twyla's just pulling up here, yeah, that's the one there, Twyla, thanks, demonstrates that with a 300-meter buffer zone from park and playgrounds, you can see that essentially there's no land that would be permitted for this use. So that's why we did not include that as a recommendation.
Aren't we lucky to have all those parks and playgrounds?
I know, lots of parks, which is great. The RCMP liaison had explained at the APC meeting that there are a number of licensed grow operations that have been grandfathered under former medical marijuana access regulations. So with that in mind, it is possible that a new production facility might want to be situated beside one of those operations, and we have very limited access to information letting us know where those operations actually are. So for that reason, council may want to reconsider the buffering of cannabis production facilities from one another to reduce possible complications on that. And then finally, the APC had also added a suggestion for adding some specific setbacks for facilities where there is an adjacent residential use. So for example, under section 6.27 that we've proposed, we could include some language such as any cannabis production facility must be set back at least 50 meters additionally from the property line of a parcel that is zoned for residential or multifamily residential use as the principal use. So with that in mind, we've got first and second reading of the proposed bylaw amendments for you today. And there are three possible options presented for council to consider. So option one would be to proceed with the amendments as proposed, or with maybe some minor amendments. Option two would recommend that staff further refine and propose the proposed recommendations. And then option three is to provide an alternative direction. We are recommending option one to you today, and we are also looking to you for some really some direction on whether or not you would like us to proceed with scheduling a public hearing at this time, which would be a combination of the in-person electronic participation, or if you feel that we should kind of defer this matter until additional relaxation of the provincial ministerial orders are in place.
Thank you very much. I will start with questions from council, and then before we go to questions from council, if we could just have the city clerk give a really brief overview of currently public hearings and how we would conduct one if we were to move forward right now.
Certainly, Madam Mayor. So the challenge being is the requirement that we would be looking to hold in person as well as an electronic forum for public participation. Keeping in mind, we would still need to adhere to the 50 person maximum, as well the electronic piece to allow for people to attend for those that that wouldn't feel safe to attend in person. The other piece in this particular case would be, how do we anticipate the number of people that we would be looking to accommodate? And then of course, adding with the public hearing component, that those in attendance are entitled to hear representations from everybody, and then the opportunity to rebut or comment on all submissions made by individuals participating at the hearing. So the magnitude of what that could potentially look like when we're talking about the cannabis cultivation piece is something that we're still trying to plan out and how we could accommodate that. Our biggest push would likely be the fact that all participants are able to provide written submissions. So we would probably be relying heavily on that. I did participate in a call with other colleagues, city clerks, etc. And at this point, we're not aware of any municipalities that are moving forward on Vancouver Island with public hearings, with the exception of the city of Nanaimo. So we're currently in some conversations with the city to see how they are accommodating that. One piece of the city of Nanaimo is the public hearings that they do have scheduled for mid-June are not ones that would be considered controversial. So we're just trying to accommodate, electronic. We see that we've been using that to accommodate these meetings, and we can see how those things can fail and people are dropped off. And then yet to anticipate like the in-person and the number of people that may take interest in this particular issue. So having said all that, stand by. We're working to try to make those accommodations. And I think with the city of Nanaimo, if I could learn more from their IT department, we may find ourselves in a position to move forward relatively shortly.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, questions from council now. I have Councillor Koon and then Councillor Haggard so far.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see this come forward. Thank you, Caitlin, for preparing this. I think that this is a pretty important component to our economic recovery. So I personally would support going ahead with it as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Haggard and then Corbeil and then Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just would like some clarification, Caitlin, please, if you don't mind. You state that there's one parking space per employee. Now, with the hours, I could see an employee going maybe like 4 days on and 4 days off. So does that mean total employees or just the number of employees at the site at one time? Do you understand?
Yeah, I think we would probably go with the number of total employees is typically how we apply that regulation.
Okay, thank you. And just a comment, I would like to move forward as well, but also understanding that I really think we need to have as much public input on this as possible, because it is kind of a contentious issue in every community. So I would not want to move forward unless we have an opportunity to hear from the public on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corbeil and then Councillor Solda.
In the report, it talks about medical marijuana and it would be grandfathered. I guess my question, Caitlin, is Health Canada talks about ventilation and odor, and we would be able to police that, I guess. But are we able to police these facilities that will be so-called grandfathered?
Yeah, so the existing facilities that are already grandfathered, we have little kind of influence over at this point, though I would see with the introduction of these new regulations that if one of those facilities was to say either wanting to become kind of legal under the new regulations or was just in general looking to change their facility, improve it or make some alterations, then they would have to come to the city and kind of play by the same rules as the new legalized facilities. But until they were making those changes, we couldn't necessarily go back and retroactively apply these rules to them since they have been grandfathered.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Question is there a plant limit to these buildings? You know, like how many plants they can have in there? You get more plants, I'm assuming you would get more of a issue with smell, as if I really know, but. could maybe Caitlin, maybe you have an answer?
Yeah, so if you refer to the definitions that we have included, most of, I think pretty much every single definition, I just have them up in front of me here, has a requirement around the square meters of the canopy space. So the growing area, which I think kind of answers your question. Okay,
I still have a concern regarding parks. I know it's not near, we're not looking near parks and that, but I'm kind of a skeptic when it comes, I'd like to put the parks in there. Future, you never know, you know, like, I don't know. I just like to have that little loophole cleared up and have not near parks and that too.
So Councillor Solda, I think the comment that was made around parks is that if we, the pink on this map showing right now is the areas that would be excluded from being allowed if we put in parks. So that's basically our entire community. So if we put parks, you couldn't be within 300 meters of a park, we would be zoning this out and not allow
okay. So
our community.
Okay, I see where you're going with that. Okay, it's just interesting. And regarding public input, I definitely agree with Councillor Haggard. I would like to have the public in person if we can to have a discussion on this.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick comment on the parks thing. I think that if we look at what we're trying to approve here is really our intent, there's other things come into play, but I think we're really focusing on the M1, 2, and 3 zones, and none of those are really close to parks, which I think is really good. And as far as the public process goes, I think we're a little late in the game coming to our zonings and those sorts of things with regards to this industry. And I'd like to see us move forward with a public process as soon as possible. As far as having wide open public meetings, it may be a year or two before we're actually allowed to do that. And we may have to rethink exactly how these public meetings appear or how we achieve them. But I'd like to move forward with public hearing as soon as we figure out the complexities of how to do that. We're behind the 8 ball. We need to move on this. We need the zonings and amendments in place so we can move on with this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Washington, any comments?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, just it's all been said, I guess. Just hats off to the planning department for their very thorough. My only comment was smell, because that's the biggest complaint you get from these people, from the people out there. And also thank you to the APC for doing their job. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just echo the comments of what mostly has already been said. I know that from my perspective and from what I hear from the community, smell is certainly the greatest concern. I think most people see this industry as an opportunity and something that that we should embrace as a community. Now that it's legalized, you know, we should be viewing it as an industry that can bring jobs just like any other jobs, and we should welcome them into the community. But I think that we want to do that subject to making sure it's not disrupting people who live in our community or people who shop in our community. And I know certainly I've had the benefit of seeing an operation that I went to visit in Winnipeg. I know that this can be done well. It can be done to a point where it doesn't disrupt neighborhoods. In fact, I had a hard time even smelling it going inside the building until the doors that specifically the cannabis was in were opened within the envelope of the building. So it was quite impressive to see an operation really doing a good job and recognizing their role in making sure that they're not disrupting neighborhoods. I know that it also can be done poorly, and I think that we need to be really cognizant of when there are operations that don't share those same values and that do disrupt neighborhoods through odor or other means. that we have a process in place to make sure that we can protect businesses, residents from being disrupted, whether it's in their homes or their businesses. And I know that at the regional district, we have, and this is a very different situation because it's an outdoor grow, but we have a member of one of the regional areas who comes regularly to the regional district, and you can see the stress in her when she talks about not being able to enjoy her home anymore because of the smell of cannabis. And I think we have to make sure that we really have plans in place and that we are safeguarded to make sure that if that does happen, we're able to solve it in some way. And I know that can be a challenge. There's a cannabis operation that's licensed in a different way, not in this way, but in one of the, I believe, the grandfathered ways that is very close to one of my businesses, and it smells very regularly, and that is difficult. And I know that a lot of the people who live in the neighborhood as well are bothered by it. So we want to make sure that we don't give up the enjoyment of our community to enable an industry. So I'm hopeful and optimistic that we can do this in a way that works. I'm really excited to see this happening in our community, and I'm really happy to see council embracing it, but I think we need to be cautious as well and make sure that companies that are coming into Port Alberni are held to a very high standard. And on the public hearing end of it, I would like to see us move forward with this as soon as possible, but making sure that we are able to engage the public through a public hearing and give everybody an opportunity to speak. So whenever staff are able to look at a way to make that work, then I'm fully supportive of doing that. I don't think we should wait until we can go back to what was a normal public hearing. Thank you. Would anybody like to read the first motion? Councillor Koon.
Yes, I'd like to read the first motion if it's on the screen. Thank you. I'll move that official community plan amendment number T5, cannabis cultivation, development permit area regulations, bylaw number 5012 be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Paulson. And before I call for the vote, I just wanted to ask Caitlin, could you, I know that there were a couple of items that we could amend within the regulations that were coming forward. Could you remind me what those were? I think you had 3 of them maybe.
Yeah, there was one, the recommendation was to leave the park buffer zone out for now. So no change would be needed there. There was 2 possible considerations, one around taking out the buffer for cannabis production facilities from one another. And I can pull where that section, just let me pull up the agenda and the motion here. Sorry, just have to scroll. That is specifically in section 6.27 under 6.27.3. So, oh, sorry, 6.2.7.2, where it says the buffer zones. So a cannabis production facility is not permitted within 300 meters of, and then or another cannabis production facility. So the thought was because of the other grandfathered facilities that could cause possible conflict. So you might want to consider removing that. Up to you, of course. And then the other thing that we had brought up was a additional section under 6.27 with some language around additional setbacks. So I thought maybe any cannabis production facility must be set back at least 50 meters from the property line of a parcel that is zoned for residential or multifamily residential use as the principal use.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that council has an opportunity to discuss those possible changes. So firstly, is everyone okay with leaving or with not making the change around parks and playgrounds? because it would effectively zone it out. And then for the other two, is there a willingness to, or a desire on council to take out the setback from other cannabis facilities? And I have Councillor Koon and then Councillor Corbeil.
I don't think it's really necessary to have a buffer between different cannabis facilities, so long as the air that is, or the odors that are emitted from these facilities are not, cannabis odors. They are odors that are, consistent with, just any business. I just don't think that we need to have a buffer because, we currently don't have a buffer between cannabis retail stores. And I suspect, a facility that is cultivating cannabis, that is handling their air properly, won't smell any worse than a cannabis store, a retail store. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I think on the facilities that are already in place, we don't really even know where they are. So it makes it kind of difficult, I think, to enforce that. The issue around the 50-meter setback when it's abutting against the residential area makes some sense. I can think of one area in town that would be zoned industrial, but across the street would be residential. I could see where the 50-meter setback wouldn't interfere with the construction of any facilities and would certainly give the residents a little bit of relief. So that makes some sense to me, the 50-meter setback.
Caitlin, are you able to comment on, do you see, are there a lot of places where that, I think the 50-meter setback makes a lot of sense. Do you see specific areas that you think it would cause problems?
I think it might certainly impact some smaller properties. We haven't conducted a specific analysis of the lands proposed to be zoned for cannabis production facilities with an additional 50-meter setback on top. We could probably do see if we could generate that in a map and do that type of analysis. So yes, I think there would be some impacts to smaller properties, and again, specifically maybe in commercial zones as well, but for larger properties, probably not a problem.
Thank you. Councillor Koon.
Thank you. I'm not sure I understand the rationale behind the 50-meter setback from residential property because, we've got other commercial properties that are not, cannabis. We've got, gas stations, for example, that are not 50 meters away from residential property. I don't see why we should be set back from 50 meters.
Thank you. So at this point, the motion that is read does not address the 50-meter setback for residential or the exclusion of or the separation between cannabis facilities. We could, I believe we could give first two readings to both of these today and then still make an amendment at third reading. So it might be worth bringing back a map so that we could look at that 50-meter and really just make a more informed decision on that. I think that is a valid point, specifically because even if we don't expect this to smell, I think that we should be somewhat cautious and know that not every cannabis operator that may express interest may operate in the same way, and we're still learning how to regulate and where we have power and where we don't, and we want to make sure we're holding people to a high standard. But I think adding an additional small setback from residential might give us just a little bit more comfort for residential property. Caitlin?
I should also just note that if we did introduce a setback, that would be something that on a site-by-site basis, we could consider variances for if an applicant had requested it as well.
Perfect. Okay, so for today, assuming we're okay, if we want to move forward with all of the readings that we have in front of us, and then we could consider further changes when this comes back. I don't hear Twyla telling us we're wrong, so.
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have the first motion read. Are there any further comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Koon, would you like to continue reading?
Yes, I'll move that official community plan amendment number T5, cannabis cultivation development permit area regulations bylaw number 5012 be read a second time.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, carried. You can continue, Councillor Koon.
Yes, and I'll move that zoning bylaw text amendment number T25, cannabis cultivation bylaw number 5013 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any comments? Seeing no comments, all in favor? None opposed, carried. And the last one?
Yes, I'll move that zoning bylaw text amendment number T25, cannabis cultivation bylaw number 5013 be read a second time.
Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, and on to item 2, of course, related from the Manager of Planning, Advisory Planning Commission Development Application, Official Community Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendments for 2710 Mallory Drive. Caitlin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the city has received a rezoning application for 2170 Mallory Drive to change the designation of the property from residential to industrial on the official community plan map, and to include the property in development permit area number 3, industrial, and to rezone the property from P1 institutional to the M1 light industry zone. The purpose of rezoning is to expand the industrial uses permitted on the subject property in order to secure a new tenant for the site. As the applicant has indicated, the building is really only suitable for industrial uses. The subject property is located near the city's southern boundary and is shared with the Tashot First Nation. The property is situated between waterfront industrial lands to the west and the Cameron Heights neighborhood to the northeast, and acts as somewhat as a buffer between the heavy industrial uses and residential uses in the area. Canal Beach is also to the west of the subject property. The building and the property have historically been used for a variety of commercial, institutional, or industrial purposes, including a mechanic and an engine repair shop. And in January of 2018, the city approved a site-specific text amendment to the P1 institutional zone for the property that allowed for some additional light industrial and commercial uses on site. At the time, the applicant had requested to maintain the existing zone and OCP classification as residential and P1 institutional, as the owner's long-term vision for the property was to develop a seniors housing facility on the site. Now, the owner's vision has since changed, and they are currently looking for a new tenant for the site. And they're working with a number of potential businesses who are interested in leasing the property. So a specific use has not been identified, but for the most part, the people being engaged or the businesses being engaged are industrial in nature. And one specific tenant that's possibly being considered by the applicant is a cannabis production facility, although the applicant is aware that this use is not yet permitted within the city or for that site for that matter. So the proposed bylaw amendments meet most of the guiding OCP policy criteria for considering new industrial lands, except for 2 of the specific policy statements in the OCP. First being that new light and medium industry shall be encouraged to locate in the Port Alberni Industrial Park, and that future industrial areas should be located with consideration of existing and intended uses adjacent to the associated impacts, so as to ensure that they are context sensitive and harmonized with adjacent land uses. So while the subject property is not located within Port Alberni's industrial park, and all other properties zoned M1 light industry are located in Port Alberni's industrial park or near Roger Street, south of the Northport commercial area. I think it's probably important to think about the context of when the OCP was created and where we're at now as a city with industrial land. As we recognize, industrial land has become increasingly scarce within the city. And since 2018, the city's been working with the ACRD on developing an industrial land inventory and action plan to expand industrial land options. So that really isn't reflected in that OCP policy statement from 2007 because things have changed a lot since then. And then to the second point, kind of about conflicting uses, I think the proposal, you could kind of argue it either way, that it is compatible with some of the adjacent uses, specifically the industrial waterfront land, but it's not necessarily compatible with the residential uses nearby. That being said, it's also light industry, which is much less intensive than, say, a medium or heavy industry use. So with that in mind, the following reasons are kind of being provided in support of the rezoning application. So the industrial designation would be in line with the existing and historic use of the site, and the M1 industrial zone allows for similar uses to the existing use of the subject property before it stopped being leased out. The property is screened from nearby residential and public areas by trees and slopes, which also aligns with the policy criteria of the OCP. The subject property would become part of an industrial development permit area, which gives the city further input over any redevelopment of that property. The property meets the lot size requirements for the M1 industrial zone. And then also finally to the point I mentioned earlier, the site might not be ideal or conducive for residential development due to the previous uses of that site, which is why the applicant has kind of deemed it really only usable for industrial uses at this point without further redevelopment and investment. The Advisory Planning Commission reviewed this rezoning application at their April 30th meeting, and there was quite a lot of discussion about the application. Some of the main concerns were regarding public access to waterfront lands and how compatible the M1 zone fits within that residential area nearby. There were also specific concerns about the proximity to Canal Beach. APC had suggested that council might want to proceed with rezoning Canal Beach to a park, because it's still designated as industrial lands. The purpose of that would really be to ensure that park stays as a park and doesn't get repurposed as industrial lands in the future. The APC also thought that it was very important for staff to get additional input from the Tayshat First Nation. And then otherwise, the majority of APC had recommended support for the rezoning application, though there was, I think, one or two who either abstained or voted against the application. So with the first and second reading of the proposed bylaw amendments being considered today, we've provided kind of three possible options for council to consider. One being to proceed with the bylaw amendments with proposed conditions, two being to propose with bylaw amendments without proposed conditions, or three, to proceed with the bylaw, or to not proceed with the bylaw amendments and provide alternative direction. We are recommending option number one to you today with the additional conditions that are outlined in the report. I think that this approach will allow for the application to continue to be considered, but with additional input from the Tayshat First Nation, and then neighboring residents will be invited to provide input at the public hearing once we proceed with that. Should council proceed today, I would encourage you to consider how these amendments impact the long-term vision for the goals expressed in the official community plan, and whether the proposed amendments are appropriate for the site as well as the surrounding neighborhood. We are not looking to schedule a public hearing at this time, but rather to continue to work with the applicant to address those outstanding conditions, if that's how you proceed to move. And then once those conditions were met, we would then request council's consideration for scheduling a public hearing. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Councillor Washington and then Councillor Koon for questions so far.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Caitlin, for your report. In the report, it mentions the sewer because it says, I'm assuming it's probably a septic system up there, and I'm thinking that should be on the sewer because I guess the sewer has to eventually go out all the way to the canal waterfront park. Who would incur the cost of that for that building to get hooked up on the sewer system?
That would be the applicant's cost, and I believe they're already working on dealing with that issue.
Thank you. Councillor Koon.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that we're consulting with the Shot First Nations, being that, you know, we should be good neighbors, and also in light of the accord that we signed last year. So I'm a bit confused as to this property being industrial. It seems to me this area is more or less residential and should be remaining that way. But given that we have very little industrial land, and perhaps this is not a high impact use, then I would hesitate, but I would support it, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Haggard.
I'm not sure if anybody can kind of give me a little bit of a historical on this site. I'm just kind of curious, what was on the property previously that would cause environmental concerns? And I can't remember what actually went on the site and that would cause those environmental concerns. And having the environmental concerns, I see why, if that's the case, that it may not be suitable for residential development. But if anybody has a little historical for me, that would be great.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure what was historically the full use of the site, but I know that there was some, why is the word slipping my mind right now? Sorry, there's been some kind of like mechanical shops and some engine repairs and kind of vehicle uses of the site. So maybe some possible contamination there. And of course, there's, you know, just because there's contamination doesn't mean that there's not an approach to remediate the site. It's just that approach might be cost prohibitive at this time based on the value and demand of the land, essentially. So that being said, you know, it's not bad to say that, you know, you could even potentially maintain the OCP designation as residential and keep that as a long-term vision for that project. But is it financially viable right now to flip and repurpose as residential? The applicant is telling us no.
Ron, historically, that was the Teleglobe building, and probably years ago, they might have dumped PCBs. I really don't know, but it's a possibility.
And I think that, you know, to say that it's cost prohibitive or it might be, we obviously don't have, I think Caitlin's going just by at this point what we're being told by the developer, unless they have, you know, reports and assessments done, then they don't have that information and we don't. So it's all really just speculation about, you know, what may or may not have happened there. And, you know, whether that forms part of our decision making or not, for me personally, it doesn't. I really would love to see that property developed as multifamily residential or a seniors facility or something like that. I have a hard time going with light industrial on a property like this, even though looking around, there certainly is residential, but there is a lot of industrial also. So it very much is a mixed use area. Obviously CME is right there, with Western beside CME as well. So there's a lot of industry in the area. what for me is the deciding factor is where we're at as a community today. I see the desire for, you know, a large scale residential development or, you know, multifamily residential development. I see the, you know, realisticness of that for our community as maybe one cycle out. So maybe 25, 30, 40 years from now, there's going to be a demand for that. And I certainly hope that it's sooner. I would almost like to see us consider a site specific use rather than a rezoning, because I don't know what other uses could potentially come with the light industrial if it doesn't end up cannabis. And I don't want to see it necessarily industrial permanently. But maybe there's a use for this property that can bring vibrancy to our community for the next 30 or 40 years. And then maybe it does transition to residential or something more along those lines as waterfront land and water view land in the community becomes more valuable. But I just think, unfortunately, we're not there yet. So I'm supportive, somewhat supportive of the application. I think my preference would be for it to be a site-specific amendment for that specific use of cannabis, or for them to bring forward exactly what it's going to be if not cannabis. But I'm open to hearing what council wants to do on this. I think I had Councillor Haggard's hand, and then that might be it for now.
I would be the last person to want to take a waterfront view lands or waterfront property and turn it into industrial. But when you actually go visit the property, it fits in very well with the industrial neighbors that they have. And if you walk the property, I can never see it have a vision for it to be developed into multifamily residential. It just doesn't, I just don't think it would ever work. I mean, it might at some point, but I think it's more suited for industrial property right now. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Solda.
I concur with you, Madam Mayor. We haven't sat down and really had a discussion about this particular piece of property. And yes, it has been emptied for a long time, but I don't know. I still see residential in there too. So unless I need to walk the property, I need to see that property, more of it. So yeah, that's where I'm right now.
What were your thoughts? I didn't quite understand your thoughts, Councillor Solda, on the application for its current use, though.
I'm really hesitant. I would like to see more information or something. I'm not there yet. So that's my thoughts on that.
Okay, other comments from council? Okay, so council, we have in front of us suggested, you know, first steps to rezoning, first and second reading, as well as the other conditions that are suggested to be put on. If council is not ready to move forward with a rezoning on this property, if there's other information we'd like, if we'd like to, if council wants to, you know, pause and just take some time to go look at the property again. I'm sure we've all been there and seen it, but again, and just, you know, wait. We could certainly bring it back to the next council meeting. I know that it was expressed at the APC as well. I think that the issue from the APC that came forward as a concern that resonated with me is the desire to have that as a residential property. For me, as much as I very much would love to see our waterfront more residential, I think that we have other key areas of our community that are more central that will be easier to redevelop residential. And I just don't think that we're there yet, where there's going to be a demand for this type of property to be turned into residential and to have a market for that. So I don't want to let that hold up possible development of that property to make it into something that, you know, could bring vibrancy and employment to our community. So I am comfortable moving forward. I also, though, I note that, you know, a lot of the interest in this property from what we've heard is for cannabis. And I'm curious what council's feelings would be on, rather than rezoning it light industrial and just not knowing what we'll end up with down the road, maybe waiting and seeing or inquiring, is cannabis what the applicant is looking for? And if so, could we just go with a site-specific use approval of cannabis rather than rezoning the whole property to light industrial? And then if cannabis doesn't work out, we might get something completely different that we didn't intend for if we give that light industrial. I think I saw Councillor Washington and then Councillor Koon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sort of mixed after hearing hearing what you have to say, but I'm thinking we should move forward with this and deem it as a short-term solution, increase your taxation base, and hopefully sooner than later, it may become back to us for rezoning for residential.
Thank you. Councillor Koon?
I wonder if we should table this for the next meeting, and in the meantime, ask the applicant if they would entertain site-specific use for this property, because I think that would be a good solution. And well, I mean, perhaps we should ask them what their specific plans are for the property.
Caitlin, has that conversation happened? Like, I'm assuming that the rezoning to light industrial is preferred, but do you know if it's been suggested if it was just a site-specific use?
We have had a couple different discussions with the applicant, and I would say that their preference at this point was to keep it general because there was not certainty about what the use was going to be. That being said, you know, council gets to set the direction on this. So if we want to give them some certainty and suggest that that's maybe a more realistic approach, I can certainly go back and have that discussion with them and then come back with an update report for sure.
Okay, thank you. Are there other comments or thoughts? So at this point, we have no motions read. My preference is really, I think I feel very uneasy about a blanket light industrial rezoning of this property. And I do remember a few years ago when we gave the other site-specific uses, that even last council was a bit apprehensive I think that the developer had wanted to keep it with the institutional zoning, but council didn't want to just see any industrial use there, recognizing that it is, you know, very close to Canal Beach, that it is close to the Sechot Reserve, that it is close to a residential area. I'm leery to give just a blanket light industrial approval. So if it is cannabis that's going to go there, then my personal feeling is that that could be a good fit. And I could see us enabling that, but I'm a bit nervous about the unknown of an industrial zoning. Caitlin?
Well, there is certainly a brilliance with technology. I have received a text message just now from the developer, which is great. Thank you for that. They have indicated to me just now that they would not prefer just for cannabis. They're dealing with 3 specific companies, some from the US and 2 from Vancouver. One's a telecom, one is cannabis, and they haven't said what the other one was at this point, but it doesn't sound like they're necessarily looking for just a site specific. They're really looking for that broader industrial kind of category for the property. I think that being said, you know, you could continue to proceed with rezoning and keeping the official community plan as residential for that longer term preference. That is certainly an option as well that council could consider.
So I think we'll let council, if anyone wants to read the motions that are in front of us. I would like more information. I'm comfortable with keeping this process forward and moving forward with what we have today. You know, knowing that we have rezoning to go through and other and other steps to this process, but I would really like more information about potentially what's going to go there. And I'll spend a bit more time looking at exactly what light industrial allows as well, just to really wrap my head around what could be moving into that neighborhood. So of course, it doesn't necessarily matter just what they're interested in right now. It's what the site could be down the road and long-term thoughts on that property. Would anybody like to read the motions? Councillor Koon?
Yeah, I'll read the motions. I'll move that official community plan amendment number 31, 2170 Mallory Drive, Mansett Family Holdings, bylaw number 5009, be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any more comments on this? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? One opposed. Carried. Thank you. And you can continue.
Yes, I'll move that official community plan amendment number 31, 2170 Mallory Drive, Mansett Family Holdings, bylaw number 5009, be read a second time.
Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any further comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
I'll move that zoning bylaw map amendment number 40, 2170 Mallory Drive, Mansett Family Holdings, bylaw number 5010, be now introduced and read a first time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
I'll move that zoning bylaw map amendment number 40, 2170 Mallory Drive, Mansett Family Holdings, bylaw number 5010, be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Second. Any comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And the last one. Oh, not the last one. Last one on the page.
No, I'll move that zoning bylaw text amendment number T24, site-specific use P1 institutional, bylaw number 5011, be now introduced and read a first time.
Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
I'll move that zoning bylaw text amendment number T24, site-specific use P1 institutional, bylaw number 5011, be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the last one, Councillor Koon.
Yes, I'll move that as a condition of the bylaw amendments and prior to final adoption of the amending bylaws, the applicant be required to provide the following. 1, submit a site plan and plans acceptable to the manager of planning in support of a development permit and submit cost estimates for the works and security in the amount required. 2, post visible civic address on main entrance gate and building to be visible from road in accordance with the City of Port Alberni house numbering bylaw. And 3, ensure there is a viable turning radius for fire truck access and egress acceptable to the city's Director of Engineering and Public Works. 4, submit security in the amount required for completion of the required water and sanitary sewer and storm works as determined by the city's engineering department. 5, submit security in the amount required for relocation of the existing hydrant as determined by the city's engineering department.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any final comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, on to item H, correspondence for action, and item 1 from the BC Restaurant and Food Service Association, Alliance of Beverage Licenses, BC Craft Brewers and the BC Wine Institute, a letter dated May 7th, 2020. Requesting council's assistance for flexible, innovative, and expedited patio permitting in response to COVID-19. And I'm going to recuse myself from this one. I'm not sure who the acting mayor is. I know I won't typically recuse myself from business items, but because this one is specifically regarding restaurants, I will recuse myself here.
And Councillor Polson is the acting mayor.
Just moving forward.
Excuse me. I have a question regarding my participation in this discussion because my brother-in-law owns a restaurant and I'm a manager in there. So do I need to excuse myself? Because can we have comment on that?
Yeah, typically if a member of council thinks that they may have a conflict, it's best to recuse yourself then from the meeting. But that is up to the individual member to make that decision.
Okay, because when it discusses patios and that, we have no plans to put an application in. For a patio, we have our own patio. What is?
So having made that comment, if you don't have any intentions of moving forward with an application, you may not wish to recuse yourself.
No, we have 50 people that fit on our patio, so we have no plans to do that.
Okay.
Excuse me, I would like to recuse myself on the basis that I am a licensee of beverages.
Okay, I think we have two people who have recused themselves, Councillor Koon and Mayor Minions. Deputy Clerk, do you want to summarize this correspondence for us, or should we just move forward?
I certainly can. Just to reiterate, in combination with the BC Restaurant and Food Association and Able BC, a responsible liquor industry, BC Craft Breweries, Wines of British Columbia, they've written, and there's including supporting correspondence from the City of North Vancouver and the City of Nanaimo, which is looking to create flexibility in local organizations, municipalities, to simplify things for business owners as they look to reopen as a result of COVID-19.
That's great. Any comments from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, let's go with, who was first? Councillor Corbeil, I'll go left to right here.
Councillor Haggard was first.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Haggard, you're first. Ladies first.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. If you take COVID-19 right out of the equation here, our vision for our downtown and our community is to have patios and sidewalk cafes and people sitting outside and walking around. So I think this really fits into our vision for our community. So I think we should do anything that we can to support our business community in making this happen as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Councillor Corbeil?
Well, and I agree with Councillor Haggard. I think this plays right into the revitalization of Third Avenue. And I would add, it's more than just restaurants. It's, many of the storefronts in town are just too small to have the proper social distancing. So I think this is a huge opportunity to get business back up and running, and at the same time to give our local community, Third Avenue in particular, a shot in the arm.
Councillor Washington, do you have any comment?
Thank you, Mayor. No, I'm good. Councillor Corbeil and Councillor Haggard have hit the nail on the head, so to speak. Thank you.
Councillor Solda.
Oops, sorry, I just muted you. In the past, when cafes and different businesses have come before council, we've always agreed The only thing that we cared for was insurance, the scooters that could pass through, and it was safe. And there was some fencing put in place because of safety issues. And I think it's a good thing in this community. I've always wanted to see something like that. And it's not just Third Avenue, it's for all areas of our community, because there's a lot of different businesses that might and would like to go forward on this. And I think it's a great thing.
Thank you, gang. I think the basic gist of this whole initiative is to give everybody a boost in the hospitality industry as they try and come out of COVID-19. And certainly there will be restrictions with numbers and so on. And really, I think it's proven that many of these places will not survive if they are on their present floor plans with regards to occupancy, 50%, 30% occupancy. That's about all I have to say on this. I think it's a great way to move forward. I'm not clear on how council would interact with the licensing branch with regards to, we could certainly approve the use of sidewalks and so on, but I'm not sure how we would interact with the licensing branch in that area. But if we do our part, we can worry about the licensing branch afterwards. Any comments on that, CEO Apply?
There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, as you know, this issue is it addresses restaurants, food services, and craft breweries. If council gives us direction on this issue, staff would like to update council, including Mayor Minions and Councillor Koon when they return on the broader topic of supporting retail and businesses in general. And some of the planning underway right now, I think, will inform this question. And because it applies to all businesses, Mayor Minions and Councillor Koon should be in that conversation. So while I don't have the answer to your question around licensing, I think the short answer is the city wouldn't interact with licensing. The city would just enable these businesses to spill out onto public property, in a controlled manner, of course, right? As is governed by WorkSafe BC. The province has established WorkSafe BC as the regulator. So the city, if you would like, the city would work with operators to help them be compliant with WorkSafe.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Washington, you're on the spot, buddy. You want to read through the presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the letter dated May 7, 2020 from the BC RFA Alliance of Beverage Licensees BC, Craft Bureaus Guild and BC Wine Institute requesting council's assistance for flexible, innovative, and expedited patio permitting, including a letter of support from the city of, be received, and the council direct staff to A, review and amend the city's existing bylaw and policies to reflect flexibility in accommodating outdoor sales, patios, etc., including expedited permitting and application and renewals, and B, until such time as existing bylaws, policies are amended, that council authorize the city to work with the applicants to permit outdoor sales, patios, etc., in an effort to bolster local economy as a result of the COVID-19 on a temporary basis.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
I wonder if I could maybe just add at the very end of B, and it's just semantics, while meeting safe distancing requirements, just at the very end of B. Councillor Washington, any problem with that?
No, I would assume that the words COVID-19 would bolster your concern, but if you want to add it, please go ahead. You have my blessing.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
WorkSafe BC, that's one of your requirements for inside and outside any restaurant, up to 6 people per table. And also I would like to see applicable insurance and scooters could go by if you're on the sidewalk and stuff, because we had a lot of complaints with businesses because people couldn't get by because they had their merchandise outside and they couldn't get by. So I would like that and it's safety. If staff, when they come and put an application in, those two things are part of it.
I would suspect that that would be part of the WorkSafe BC plan, but we could include that.
Okay.
So any other discussion? I'm looking for hands. Pretty quiet out there. Oh, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. When you look at the existing patios that we have in our community, they're always full and they're always busy. So that just shows how much people enjoy sitting outside in our community, especially in our summertime. And especially now, I would much prefer to sit outside in a patio than inside a restaurant or a cafe if I had the ability to do that. So I think this is a great great idea to move forward for our community and our businesses as well. Thank you. And I think CEO had a comment as well.
There, your hand is up.
It is sometimes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll hold my comment until after you vote. And then when Mayor Minions and Councillor Koon are back in, I'd like to add something to this.
Wonderful. Okay. The only thing, let's deal with this. I have an add-on to this particular item. All in favor of the motion as read? That's passed. I just wonder if it would be appropriate that the city sends a follow-up letter to Minister Ebby and CC the appropriate provincial ministers and the Chamber of Commerce supporting the British Columbia Restaurant and Food Services Association letter. Could I have a seconder for that? Anybody?
Yeah.
Nobody? Oh, Councillor Washington seconded. All in favor? Carried. And if we could call the mayor and Councillor Poulin back to the table, that would be great. Take the spotlight off of me. We text them.
Okay, I'm here. I got put in the waiting room.
Oh,
I'm here too.
I noticed that Councillor Fly has his hand up, so you're right back at her there, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In your absence, Council, and Councillor Poon's absence, Council dealt with the issue on the agenda, but there's a broader issue that staff would like to update Council on in terms of supporting the restart or stage 2, the economic response to the province's stage 2 as we reopen the economy. And if you wouldn't mind, Madam Mayor, I'd like you to hear from Pat Deacon first, and then Twyla Slonsky from their various perspectives on that.
That would be great. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Council. Really pleased to hear of your support for assisting us to move forward rapidly. As the CAO has said on several occasions, that we're taking a slow and cautious approach to the opening of the facilities for the safety of staff members and the public. And we're taking a faster response to assistance to not only food and beverage services, but also retail outlets as well. We've received correspondence from or inquiries from several businesses in the community who are looking for our assistance. We've attended a legal webinar put on by the Municipal Assurance Association of BC and the LGLA that laid out some ways that municipalities could work with the business community to ensure openings. WorkSafe BC is laying out a template for every business type as to how they should approach the safety of their staff and their customers. We see them as the lead agencies in this. We are looking to other municipalities for their best practices, and essentially what is being suggested that in most cases, license of occupation for a short period of time or a specified period of time would serve to allow businesses to get back up and running. Everybody is hoping that with expanded access to public space, that the businesses will become viable even with the distancing measures put in place, and that they will be able to, they will be required to incorporate other WorkSafe BC criteria moving forward. They've got a job ahead of themselves. We're pleased to say that many of the businesses are keen to start, and the city staff are keen to assist them. So we are encouraging those who have reached out to us. We are proposing that if council allows us to move forward and provides a policy, that we will go ahead and start reaching out to all of the members of the business community, starting with food services, food and beverage services, and then moving on to retail. We would reach out to them, see if they do have any requests that they would make for either street or patio space, keeping in mind, as has been brought up in the discussion, concerns about sidewalk safety, insurance liability, scooter traffic, fencing, all those kinds of things. Basically, what we did go through with the patios that we have approved in previous years, and are anxious to move forward. So we have, with the CAO's direction or guidance, we've begun to lay out an approach to this, and it's an approach that we have been following thus far. And as item B in the the motion that was adopted says that we are expecting an amendment to policy, but you would, council has authorized us to move forward. So yep, we're keen to be going. And with that, turn it back to the CAO.
He'll pop back up eventually.
There he is. Thank you, Pat. Madam Mayor, can we hear from the Deputy City Clerk, please?
And just to add further to Pat's comments, he made mention of a policy which will speak to the reopening and the recovery plans for our local government, City of Port Alberni. There is some joint efforts being made on the part of the MIABC, Lidstone and Company, Civic Info, and the LGLA to craft somewhat of a basis or a framework that local governments, individual local governments, can then work from in creating our own policy, realizing that other organizations are different in some regard. So that we will put in front of council at your next regular meeting on June 8th. And also just a further comment on the license of occupation, which we will provide council with a template at your June 8th regular meeting. And that will capture things such as the fencing, the insurance, the utilizing public space that these businesses will be extending into while they look to resurrect their businesses. Important to note that a license of occupation will give all things and benefits that a lease does, except it gives the municipality the opportunity to make it cancel the license or to do emergency works that are required. Another benefit of the temporary license to occupy is that notice of disposition is not required in this case. So again, those will be brought forward to you at your June 8th meeting for consideration and endorsement.
Thank you. Anything further on this, CAO?
No, Madam Mayor, nothing more.
Great. Okay, so assuming we are just moving forward in the agenda now, no proclamations, correspondence for information. City Clerk.
Okay, we have 5 items of correspondence, one from the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission, which is essentially their minutes from their meeting held March 4th. You have correspondence from Minister Conroy, Minister of Children and Family Development, inviting council and members of our community in joining British Columbians in celebrating the strength, creativity, resilience, and tenacity of young people who are in or have been in care. While face-to-face events are not taking place this year due to COVID, we are encouraged to visit the BC Child and Youth in Care website for tips and ideas for hosting virtual events or other creative ways to celebrate. We have an email from Mr. Thomas, who has expressed support to council in exploring transit service to East Vancouver Island. You have a letter from Mayor Haynes of the District of Saanich, indicating its council's commitment to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy and encouraging other councils to do the same. And lastly, we have correspondence from Minister Selena Robinson, advising that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs is opening the next request for proposals for the Community Housing Fund. This RFP process will remain open until mid-January 2021. This to allow proponents time to prepare submissions. And that's all.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move receipt of the correspondence? Moved by Councillor Koon. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any questions or comments on any of these items? Councillor Koon.
City Clerk, could you just scroll so that it shows up on the screen? Okay. I was going to say something about the BC Child and Youth in Care Week. I thought that was something worth celebrating, and because youth in care are really quite disadvantaged and they face a lot of stigma in our society. So I personally would like to see us celebrate that, celebrate some of their successes and their experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, absolutely. Councillor Corbeil.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering how we could be involved in the 5th piece of correspondence regarding housing. There's some opportunities there for even municipalities, but obviously with nonprofits. And it sounds like there's something there. I just don't know exactly how we would be involved or how we would approach it. Do you have any suggestions?
I do know that there are groups in our community who have been waiting for this funding stream to open back up. The Community Housing Fund, as well as the Indigenous Housing Fund. There are some applications that I know are near ready to go, if not ready to go already. So I will certainly be reaching out to those groups that I'm aware of. And typically we are aware when groups are working on significant housing projects because they've engaged with us in some way. I believe that they will know already, but we'll be reaching out just to make sure that, you know, anyone who is working on a project are getting those applications in. And we've, I mean, as we know, we've been very successful with BC Housing funds coming into our community and housing, supportive housing, as well as low income housing, affordable housing being, we've had a lot of investment in the community from BC Housing in the last couple of years, and a lot of approved projects that are just starting to begin construction. I had a meeting with the Premier as well as Minister Darcy, Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. Feels like forever ago, but it was right before COVID, so it must have been in March. And we spoke specifically about you know, how successful we have been with housing, but also the need for more housing in the community. And although it's not Minister Darcy's portfolio, she's very engaged with some of the decisions that go on, because we know that you know, people struggling with mental health and addictions are often the people, some of the people at least, who need to take advantage of the affordable housing or supportive housing that we're putting in. So I think our role is really advocating to the province continually for the need for this type of housing in our community. And we're going to continue doing that. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. And just further to that, I think how the city can be more involved is to be supportive of these groups when they do apply for housing funding by rezoning or variances or whatever they need and assistance to making this housing happen. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, then on receipt of the correspondence, all in favor? Carried. There's no report from in camera, so on to council reports. Are there any items people would like to highlight? Councillor Koon, well done submitting your report. I think we made a rule you don't have to submit during COVID. You are the only one. Any items people would like to highlight from over the last couple of weeks? I know we have just a lot more opportunity for us to each catch up with each other lately, so might not be as much. Okay, seeing none, I will move receipt of council reports. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Paulson. All in favor? Carried. And new business, I think Councillor Solda had something to bring forward.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I had to move my computer around because it was dying, the plug. Anyways, what I want to bring up is the commercial rent relief applications have just opened up today, and Trudeau just announced it too. So I'm hoping that the businesses in Port Alberni, the landlords, will help their renters and apply for this. There's a lot of businesses that have contacted me and said they were going to close if they didn't have any rent relief. And these are the mom and pop operations. And so that brings me to our tenants. And I know the city can't give a reduction in rent, but could they, and municipalities normally can't apply for this, but could we, on behalf of our tenants, since they are giving this relief?
So I think that I don't think that we would be able to apply for this. First of all, I think that you have to have a mortgage on your property to be eligible because it's through CMHC, unless that requirement has changed since the program was initially announced. I think municipalities are also exempt still, though. I think we'll probably ask our Director of Finance to look into this to verify. When we started talking about help for businesses and help for people who rent from the city a month or two ago, I made the comment that businesses should not get a better deal because they rent from the city than any other business. They also, unfortunately, should not get a worse deal. So it's a bit unfortunate if our tenants can't get the 75% rent reduction if they qualify otherwise because they rent from us. We're putting them at a disadvantage. So I think that the first step we should take, Councillor Solda, is asking our Director of Finance to verify, properly, other than us just reading the regulations, if the businesses who rent spaces from the city are able to apply. I suspect they are not. And if they are not, then I think the next step should be us advocating, through Gord Johns has been a great advocate through this, and also writing to the federal government to talk about some of these issues. I personally think this rent subsidy program is far too restrictive as it is. It requires the landlord to forgive 25% of the rent. Many landlords are not willing to do that, and therefore their tenants don't qualify for the 50% from the provincial and federal government. There's a lot of holes in this program, and I think that the federal government has done a really good job of addressing gaps as they're brought forward. So I think that we can use our voice to highlight a specific situation, which is businesses renting from municipalities, and say this is missed here, and we don't want our businesses to suffer because they don't meet your program requirements because they rent from us. So I think that we should go through the process, make sure we understand the program fully, and if they don't qualify, we should be advocating on their behalf for the government to expand the program so that all businesses qualify.
And I would agree with you. There's a lot of business owners that own their own building, and I've been advocating on that because I agree that renters cannot apply if the building is owned by the landlord, and there's a lot of mom and pops operations in that situation. So totally agree, but I think we should get the facts first.
For sure. So Tim, if you could just ask Andrew for the next meeting to clarify the program and bring us it doesn't have to be a report, just an update on it so that we can understand if the businesses who lease from us are able to qualify or not.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll do that.
Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, this program has changed so many times, and I totally agree with our MP. Gord Johns has been advocating quite heartily on this.
For sure, and for a lot of the programs, and
Yes.
To credit the federal government as well, I've been really impressed by how responsive the federal government has been to changes as gaps are identified. So we've seen the wage subsidy program change significantly. We've seen the business loan programs change significantly. So hopefully this is an area that changes as well, because I don't think as it's currently laid out, this really serves businesses very effectively. Any other new business to bring forward? Councillor Paulson.
Ronnie, come lately again. I'm just reflecting back, going through the minutes from the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission, and I noticed a reference in there that the groups actually mulled over the possibility of the train station RFP. And I wonder if for a future council meeting, we could maybe have a report on the status of that RFP. Thank you.
Thank you. Getting closer every day. Okay, any other new business to bring forward? Seeing none. City Clerk, were there any questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have two members of the public that have submitted two questions, starting with the first one from Mr. Neil Anderson. Question 1, should council members in their personal and business endeavors be required to adhere to the same standards regarding provincial and municipal regulations and bylaws as council expects of other businesses and residents in the community? His second question, if the standards set by City Council conflict with the standards set in a councillor's private endeavors, should the person as a business owner and as a City Council member be required to explain to their constituents the two different standards?
I think those are very much not a question for me to answer on behalf of council. I think absolutely we should all follow the same standards, and I know that city staff are ensuring that in specific situations that is happening, and council members are required to follow the same standards that we expect of any member of the public. Is there another question?
Yes, moving on to the second individual that submitted a couple of questions. They're from John Adams, and he asks, would it be possible to have a copy of the lease between the city and the Chamber of Commerce? Could council explain how a lease works in this case? The city is paying the Chamber of Commerce. In normal lease arrangements, the owner of the property would be collecting funds for the use of the leased property and buildings. And his second question, could the CAO or council look into removing the underground gas station and oil tanks at McLean Mill?
CAO, could you comment on this one? I believe the lease is public and available, and we could forward it to Mr. Adams, and then on the work to be done at McLean Mill.
Sure, Madam Mayor. There isn't actually a lease between the Chamber and the city for McLean Mill. There's an operating agreement, and the operating agreement sets out some of the rights that the Chamber has in terms of exclusivity using some of the facilities. So there is not a lease agreement. Where some of the confusion has come into play is when we advertised the agreement. We use language that is specific in the community charter, I believe. So we mentioned a lease in our ad. So it's led people to believe that there's a lease document out there. There is not. But certainly we can provide the operating agreement. As far as the underground fuel tanks on McLean Mill, on the heritage zone, we're aware that they're underneath a building, and so not easy to get to. We are going to be tendering the dam project shortly and hoping to undertake that work this summer. And if we have attractive pricing on that project, we plan to include in the tender documents a breakout price for removing the tanks. And or a breakout price for machine time by the hour, that kind of thing. And if we get attractive pricing, which we're hopeful to, and if we have enough budget space, we may be able to undertake the tank removal as part of the dam remediation. Those tanks are, kind of tagged on to the end of the dam. So the tank removal is not integral to the dam project, but if we're able to complete it at the same time, there will be some advantages, obviously having equipment there and that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very helpful. Thank you. And thanks for the clarification on the lease versus operating agreement. The operating agreement, of course, is what we have. And when I say public in the agenda, it's because that was public in the agenda. So we might want to just forward it on to Mr. Adams so that he has it for his reference.
Do that.
Okay, and if there's no other questions, would somebody like to move adjournment?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Koon, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. All in favor? Carried. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much.